So I came across this Charlie Kirk video on YouTube, and I've never watched much of his stuff. I've watched a few debates. My brother-in-law showed me some, and although I agreed with a lot of his ideas, and I still do, I just was never the biggest fan of him. Nothing against him necessarily. I just was never, I don't know, just the way he presented stuff and the way he talked. I was just never a big fan of it. And it's not that being provocative is wrong. Like, I actually love that. I love that, when, you know, just being a man and being not provocative unnecessarily, which I feel like sometimes he was. But, but that's just my opinion. But, I love, being firm in what you believe and whatnot. But I don't know, something about him I just didn't like him, right? For whatever reason. But I came across this video and I watched I watched a lot of it, kind of skipped around to the parts that were interesting. And I was very impressed, with what he was doing here. He was at this, like, summit, this college. It wasn't a college. I don't know if it was a college campus, but it was some group of, college age kids. And they were talking about, I don't know, just various things that, we're still dealing with today. A lot of it, relationship stuff and whatnot, with some of it. But he kind of, in the beginning, before taking questions, he was giving an address. And in the beginning, he talked specifically to the guys in the audience. And, he did the typical, we've all heard it as guys your whole life. Some guys need to hear it. A lot of those guys need to hear it. But, you gotta be respectable. You gotta, earn her trust, or you gotta work. Just general stuff that has been pounded into our heads for forever, from the church pulpit, from everything, right? So it's somewhat good stuff, but it's not what the guys need. It's not what the world needs right now. But regardless, what I do like, though, is he made sure to address the women. And I think he thought what he was saying was very, very controversial or very big, or he was like really putting himself out there by saying this. In my reality, he didn't do it enough. Like, he was too gentle. He was too beating around the bush for some reason, as pastors and as speakers often do when it's women, right? The guys, they just love to hound on them. The girls, they just kind of tiptoe around it. And he kind of still did that. But he did talk about some good stuff, and I was, a big fan of what he was saying. He was talking about the issues of women being promiscuous in culture, right? He said, it's not new that men want sex, right? That's not new. What is new and what is different is that women are giving it in our culture today, right? Those are some novel words. That's a unique way to put it, and I think it's very accurate. And then he talked about some other stuff, like, your husband doesn't want you to have any type of high body count, really zero. And he talked a little bit about how girls, will focus on the wrong things and not focus so much on um, starting a family, right? And they put their priorities elsewhere. So, although I feel like he did it in a softball kind of way, he talked about some really good stuff. And I was sitting there listening. I was like, man, this is great. And what was upsetting to me is I realized that, he's like taking the place and doing what a lot of pastors ought to do, which is address young people, both the guys and the girls. For some reason, if they're going to address young people at all, it's just the guys. But he addressed the girls too, and do it in a very plain way, a very clear way. Don't speak in spiritual ambiguity, right? Talk about the current issues that they're dealing with, which is what he was doing. Even taking questions, right? allowing them to take questions. Maybe there's room for that in the church, right? A time when the pastor's up there, and instead of just giving a prepared sermon, or at the end of his prepared sermon, he has to actually know his stuff, and people can ask questions, in that congregation, right? Up front, kind of like Charlie Kirk does. So, in one sense, it wasn't, I don't feel like he, addressed everything in a perfect way, but who does, right? I feel like he was very soft-handed and still to an extent. But even so, he at least is talking about it, right? He's at least addressing some of the issues going on. And the sad part is that, no one in the church is doing that, right? You got to go on YouTube, you got to go to one of these events and find this guy that's a Christian, but he's also in the political world and whatnot. And you got to get it from him, right? In some sense, the church is just a joke right now. It's been corrupted by the culture. It's been feminized. Just this social, with the socialism, with the feminism, and it's really sad. But it was really nice to hear that, right? Nice to hear Charlie Kirk talking about that stuff. I think it was really good. It was very interesting though, and I feel like a lot of, Gen Zers and Boomers do this, what he did was he talked about all these issues that are causing declining birth rates, right? We're not even at a sustainable level right now. Causing people not to get married, not to have kids, causing issues, and explaining why we're dealing with the issues we're dealing with now, right? He did a very good job, I feel like, at explaining that. But then turns around and says almost verbatim, if you're not married right now, it's your fault. He says that almost verbatim with no apology, right? And I just kind of found it interesting, right? On the one side, at least he's talking about it, right? But on the flip side, he has the same conclusion and response that, the older generations have, which is, it's all your fault. You're in the situation. It's your fault. And you can get yourself out of it. And it has nothing to do with stuff going on. It's just completely your fault. And it's up to you. Which seems like a logical fallacy to me. I don't know. I haven't thought a ton about it, really, till now. Just this idea of this declining birth rate, declining the age of people getting married, having kids is older, a lot older, they're having less kids. Relations between the sexes is so bad now, right? And there's divorces like 50-50 or 50%, and all these issues, right? Not to mention all the other financial woes and everything. And to talk about that and point that out is fantastic, but then to turn around and say it has no bearing on your situation, and despite all that, it's completely your fault. That, I don't know, I don't think that was a good look for him. I don't know if people caught that, but I caught it, definitely. So it's just kind of interesting, someone in there, I don't know, how old he was at the time, just like breaking out of that mold and speaking to young people on their level with what's going on, but still having that tendency to be like, completely contradict yourself and be like, all right, but it's all your fault. And that was a little frustrating, but there was good. I'll take the good with the bad. At least he's talking about it. So there's no excuse why, people in the church can't be doing that. Why we can't be hearing more of that. And we're not, right? And young guys are fed up, and I'm sure the women would even appreciate it, right? Getting that talk, hearing about that stuff, because they don't get it like anywhere else. They kind of get it on some of these fringe podcasts where they have on a bunch of like hoes and they ask these questions and try to like show how degenerate these women are. And I suppose there can be good from that, right? But we really need it in the church. We need, and I think some of those cases are a bit extreme, but we need that type of communication in the church, that type of preaching in the church. For the young girls and the young guys, we both need it, right? And we're not getting it at all. I really don't know what people are doing in church these days, honestly, right? But from a young person's perspective, right? So, but yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I thought it was great he was talking about that. Like, how have I never heard that? And that was a striking thing. I'm hearing this from him. I'm like, wow, that's so fantastic. Yeah, let's talk about the promiscuity going on, how a lot of girls aren't hardly dateable or marryable, and even some of the issues with the guys. Guys just their degenerate behavior and whatnot. But I don't need to go down that because we've all heard it a million times. And I'm like, man, this is fantastic. Why have I never heard this? Why have I never heard this from the church? And why have I never heard this from spiritual leaders at all, ever? You know. So that was good, but then there was also, that realization, this should not be a rare thing, right? You shouldn't have to go to some college summit group, whatever, to hear it. And it's almost like, it's not too late, but it almost is. Like, it's gotten so bad now where maybe people will start speaking up, but they just let it get so far. And then, of course, there's this sad side where oftentimes they're still in that mindset. Even if they do recognize that, they're still in the mindset, but, like Charlie Kirk was just, yeah, but despite all that stuff I just said, it's all your fault. And there are going to be people where it is their fault, but is that going to be like 64% like it is now, where 64% of people are single and not doing anything about it? Is it like, is the number of people that are apathetic and not doing anything about their situation, has it risen dramatically as well? Has that risen dramatically as well? I don't think so. But yeah, it just doesn't even make sense logically. But yeah, I thought that was good. I'm like, I'll take the good with the bad. It was good to hear. I was kind of just flipping through scriptures earlier. And, basically now. Came across a couple verses. I came across one and it reminded me of another. So this is Proverbs 20:24. A man's steps are directed by the Lord. How then can anyone understand his own way? And then there's a very similar verse a few chapters earlier in chapter 16, verse, I think it's 9. In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. Something I'm thinking about and I've talked with a buddy about is just, well, even in light of what we were just talking about here, right? Autonomy and how much is up to you, right? A man can have plans, and I don't think that's bad, and I don't think Proverbs says it's bad. And you can have good plans, right? And good goals. But you can make mistakes along the way. Or you do everything right. But there's still, and we can't forget this, there's still the aspect of divine intervention, of God working in your life and working in the lives of others, right? Other people you're praying for. There's still that free will going on our own part, where we have plans and we do things, right? Maybe we do the right things, maybe we do the wrong things. But despite all that, especially if you're a child of God and you've accepted Jesus as your Savior, God is still directing your steps, right? Or here, the Lord is determining your steps. So no matter what, there's that aspect of, I'm going to try something, I'm going to aim for something. Maybe it's a certain job, maybe it's starting a family, a certain project, and you can do everything right and then it fails. You got to know that God is working and He's determining your course. You're planning your steps, but the Lord is determining your course. And then on the flip side, you may do some of the wrong things, right? You may do wrong things. At times your motives may not be entirely pure. But if you're a child of God, you'll come back around. He'll convict you, I believe. And the Lord is still going to bring you where you need to go. He's still, to a degree, controlling your path. Even if you slip, even if you fail, right? So when we experience failures and we've done everything right, I don't think we should be just entirely distraught, right? Because the Lord is determining our path, and we need to realize that. And then when you fail and mess up, don't think you screwed it all up. Don't think that, oh well, I blew it this time, right? Because the Lord is still determining your path. And I think, at least for me, I forget that sometimes, right? I forget that. You know, I feel like, man, I've done everything right. I've tried to do the right thing, everything. But stuff is just not going my way. The Lord determines your path, man. Or I think of times I've screwed up. Maybe I haven't made the best financial decision, or I've fallen short in how I've treated someone, and that relationship maybe didn't work out, or whatever. The Lord still determines your path, right? So, you know, I'm not taking that total predestination approach where, and there's another word for it, right? Where no matter what you do, stuff is going to work out. You have no say in the matter. Just kind of lay back, and you know, if God's working, if God's acting, it's going to get done, right? Because part of that verse is man determines his steps, man plans his course, right? So there's still that level of the man, you putting in effort, having a plan, striving for things. But it should also take a little bit of that burden off, a little bit of that pressure, right? Where it's like, you know, and I hate to use him as an example again, but, you know, maybe a Charlie Kirk character in your life, right? Or an elder, a parent, or whatever, that is saying, you know what, your problems, I know all this stuff is going on, but it's all on you, and you're where you're at because that's what you want. I don't think that's true. I don't even think it makes sense, to be frank, but it should take some of that burden off of you, and you should kind of tune some of that out, I think, right? Because that person speaking to you, they're not speaking through the Spirit. They're not speaking through the Word. Because if they were in the Word, they know, hey, you're trying to do the right thing, man. You're trying to do the right thing, and God has a plan, and He's determining your course, right? And then on the flip side, you know, you aren't totally doing everything right, but maybe you want to, but you've slipped up a few times. Don't listen to those voices that are saying it's because of that. It's because of that time you failed that one time. It's because of whatever instance, right? The Lord determines my path. So, tune those people out. Know God's got a plan for you, and He's going to determine your course. Still plot your steps a little bit. Put some thought into it. Put some planning into it, whether it's like writing your goals down or just being serious in your prayers about what you desire, what you're striving for. And just know the Lord determines your course, and just let that burden be lifted off of you a little bit. You know, and I can think of a few instances, right, where, I mean, I can just think of one. I'll mention this one. I moved back down after living in the city. Well, not really in the city, but I moved, and I had plans on, I don't know, kind of in my head, you know, plan on maybe getting a house or something like that. But without really much planning, you know, or much preparation, an opportunity kind of fell in my lap a little bit that I wasn't trying for, I wasn't planning for. And it was a small rental unit. Well, it was 4 rental units. It was a building, quadruplex. And it just kind of came about. And I was dutiful to take advantage of it, to figure out how much I wanted to offer and what would need to be put into it, work wise, money wise, to make it sustainable. I put a little bit of that into it, but it was really just, it was just along the way. I was like, all right, we'll just talk to the realtor. We'll get this thing rolling. Doing some research on the side. And it just kind of ended up working out, you know. And I look back and I think, well, I wasn't really praying a lot for that. I wasn't really planning a lot for that. And it just kind of happened, right? And then I think about instances where there's things I pray for a lot, things I plan for a lot, things I beg for, things I, you know, much more than this building, right? That I just am really trying for, striving for. And, I think I'm doing everything right. And, I don't receive them right away. Or it doesn't come about. Or you think about relationships and friendships and whatever that you're trying to make happen and it just isn't working. Or then the ones you just stumble across. A few of my like best friends, it was just kind of on accident. It was just a brief conversation and the rest is history, right? And I didn't really put much effort into it. I didn't really pray about it or anything like that. So I'm just seeing it. I'm sure you can think of examples in your life, right, where you've received blessings you haven't really planned for. Or in other instances, things you've tried to do, plan for, and put a lot of effort and prayer into, and it doesn't seem like it's playing out like you planned. And I think that this verse just sheds some light on that, right? In the good and in the bad, man prepares his way, he plots his path, but the Lord determines his course. In his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. So don't forget about God in the picture, right? And don't let someone speak to you as if God isn't in the picture. For some reason, Christians will still do that. They'll say, oh yeah, God's got a plan, he's over everything, but then they'll criticize you and speak to you as if God isn't in the picture, as if he doesn't have a reason for you being there, And that's really frustrating, and I think it's really easy for us to forget. It's really easy for me to forget, think, what am I doing wrong here, How did I get in this situation? Don't forget about God, right? Don't forget about him. He's got a plan for you, and you're not going to screw it up. I really don't believe that you're going to screw it up. And you got to realize that, people in the Bible, people that we idolize in the Bible, people that we respect, and if you just follow their story, it's often like that. It's often, them trying to do the right thing, and then them failing, right? Or then just out of nowhere, God gives them a blessing. God puts something in their life that they didn't seem to deserve. And that's just the Lord acting. He's working in his mysterious ways. We say the Lord works in mysterious ways. It's cliche, but it's true. It's true. And he works in your life in mysterious ways. He works in my life in mysterious ways. So try not to forget about that. I'm trying to constantly remember, trying to remember that verse. And that's why it's important to be in the Word. But yeah, you can plan things out exactly how you want them to go. But you're not going to miss out on a blessing because you screw up. And if it seems like you did screw up and it's causing failure, just know, there may be more to it. It may not just be because of you. It may be because God has a plan and he's determining your course. I know he is. It's not just a maybe. That's a fact. We read that in the Bible. That's a fact. So don't forget about it. Tune out the people that are telling you otherwise. That's for sure. So yeah, and then just stay in the Word. Stay in the Word, man.